Most people look at Leonardo da Vinci and see a genius, a man touched by something divine, operating outside the rules that govern ordinary minds. That is a coping mechanism. It lets the average man file Leonardo under unreachable and walk away from his own potential without guilt. The truth is colder. Leonardo was not a miracle. He was a machine, built from structured observation, deliberate synthesis, engineered solitude, and a mind that refused to separate any discipline from any other. 5 mechanisms assembled one of history's most formidable intellects. Today, we open that machine and study every gear. This is the unfinished canvas, the doctrine that Leonardo's most documented failure was also his most revealing mechanism. Of the roughly 20 paintings historians attribute to him with confidence, he completed fewer than half. The Adoration of the Magi abandoned. St. Jerome in the Wilderness abandoned. Biographers call this dysfunction. They are wrong. Psychology identifies the pattern beneath it as identity foreclosure in reverse, where most men lock into a single identity early and stop exploring. Leonardo refused foreclosure entirely. Every unfinished canvas was a laboratory terminated the moment the intellectual problem was solved. The painting was never the point. The problem was the point. The mechanism for you before you begin any project. Write one sentence identifying the problem you are actually trying to solve. Not the deliverable, the problem. When the problem is solved, evaluate honestly whether the deliverable still needs completing or whether you have already extracted its value. The average man measures himself by what he finishes. The architect of ideas measures himself by what he understands. But understanding without a method for acquiring it is philosophy without a spine. Which is why Leonardo's curiosity was never random. This is the Observation Doctrine, Leonardo's first and most foundational principle, stated in his own notebooks in terms that read less like an artist's note and more like a scientist's standing order. See what is actually there, not what you expect to find. He dissected cadavers across years of private anatomical study, by his own notebook accounts. Dozens, not because anatomy served his paintings, though it did, but because he could not accept second-hand knowledge of any system he could examine directly. Nietzsche would later name the underlying commitment amor fati, the love of what is as opposed to what is convenient to believe. Leonardo applied it empirically. Reality was the only authority. The mechanism is an audit applied once weekly. Choose one belief you currently hold about your work or your own capability. Identify the last time you tested it against direct evidence rather than assumption. If the answer is never, the belief is a story, not a fact. Discard it or test it. Those are the only 2 options. The average man inherits his assumptions and calls them experience. The sovereign observes, tests, and revises without sentiment. But observation alone produces data without direction. The question is what Leonardo did with everything he saw. This is the synthesis engine, the mechanism by which Leonardo collapsed the walls between disciplines and used each field as a lens to solve problems in every other. He used hydraulics to understand the circulatory system. He used the flight mechanics of birds to design machines no contemporary could build. He used anatomy to make paint breathe. Mathematics and strategy both illuminate why this works. The Pareto principle identifies that most of a field's problems are solved by a small number of its tools. Those tools, once mastered, transfer across domains with disproportionate force. A man who understands load, bearing physics, deeply understands something true about organizational structure, about rhetoric, about the human body. Leonardo did not spread himself thin. He drilled deep in multiple shafts and then connected the tunnels. The mechanism: identify your 2 most developed skills. Write one sentence explaining how each could solve a problem belonging to the other. Do this monthly. Force the collision. The average man builds one shaft and calls it expertise. The strategist connects every shaft he digs into a single underground system. A system that powerful, however, requires something most men consistently underestimate: the right kind of alone. This is the Solitude Paradox. Leonardo's recognition that depth of thought is structurally incompatible with constant social input, and that isolation was not a cost of his work, but a condition of it. His notebooks return repeatedly to a single operating principle: the mind that is never alone is never fully working, not as preference, as mechanical observation about cognitive load. Biology confirms the constraint. The prefrontal cortex governs abstract reasoning and long-range synthesis. It is the first system degraded by sustained social stimulation and context switching. Deep work and constant availability are not competing priorities. They are mutually exclusive states. Leonardo did not find time for solitude. He protected it with the same rigor he applied to everything else. The mechanism is a hard boundary. 1 block per day, minimum 90 minutes. No exceptions below the rank of emergency. Dedicated to your highest order problem with 0 inputs permitted. Not the most urgent task, the most important one. Guard it like territory. The average man surrenders his deepest hours to whoever demands them loudest. The emperor reserves his sharpest hours for the problems only he can solve. But a mind built for depth still faces its oldest enemy, the knowledge that the body carrying it is temporary. This is the Immortal Blueprint, Leonardo's operating principle that the work must be designed to function after the hand that made it is gone. He left notebooks, not polished manuscripts, raw working documents, written in mirror script, filled with half-finished theorems, flying machine schematics, anatomical drawings, water current studies. He knew they were incomplete. He left them anyway because an incomplete blueprint in the right hands produces more than a finished painting locked in a private collection. Compounding is the mathematics behind this. Small investments in transferable systems made consistently multiply across time in a way that single event outputs cannot. A painting is linear. It produces value once, at the moment of viewing. A system of thought compounds. It produces new value every time someone applies it to a new problem. The mechanism: for every significant project you complete, write 1 page of working notes, explaining not what you made, but how you thought while making it. Not a portfolio piece, a transmission. Ask whether a capable person reading those notes could extend your work without you. If the answer is no, the work ends with you. The average man builds outputs that die when his attention moves on. The architect builds systems that keep producing long after his name becomes a footnote. 5 mechanisms, 1 mind. What remains is not admiration for Leonardo da Vinci. It is a verdict on whether you are building anything that survives you. Drop the consolation that genius is born and not assembled. Define the problem beneath every project before you touch the deliverable. Adopt direct observation as your only authority. Test every belief against evidence or discard it. Build your synthesis engine by forcing your deepest skills into collision with each other monthly without waiting for inspiration. Start protecting your highest hours the way a border is protected, with non-negotiable force. Refuse to build outputs when you could be building systems. Become the blueprint.